and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine Bennis podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'll be talking about Season 9, Episode 21, the finale. Hello, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well out there. This is it, the last episode. We're doing it. It's happening. First, thank you for your patience. I originally thought it would take me 2 weeks to get this done, but here we are on 2.5 weeks since the last episode got released, and I'm still not quite done yet. So thank you for your patience, and let's just have fun in this last episode. I want you to have fun too. Hopefully you have some balloons, your everyday balloons like Kramer. Maybe you got some muffin tops to celebrate, however you are celebrating this special day. Thank you. And thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Well, some developments in my life since the last episode. I sliced the hell out of my thumb 2 weeks ago. I was cutting a baguette and I had a brand new set of knives, and I was rushing, and that knife slipped onto my thumb through the nail. Very deep cut. I'm actually 2 weeks out from that incident, and it's still pretty gnarly looking. I had the equivalent of stitches. I went to urgent care, and they said for this type of a kind of, it's in a tough place. It's sort of on the curve of your thumb. We don't do traditional stitches, but we will do what's called a T-strip. It's basically this adhesive strip that you have to keep dry and clean for 7 to 14 days. It just dissolves on its own. So it's been a thing. I'll spare you the details, but I don't recommend it. I do not recommend using a brand new knife and then slicing your thumb open. It's not fun. Good God, that pain, and the amount of blood. Okay, sorry, I told you I wouldn't go into details, but those are really disgusting details. Just trust me, it's not a fun experience. Just avoid it. Learn the proper techniques about how to chop stuff. And I try to do it. I watch enough Top Chef. I watch many cooking shows. I know how I'm supposed to hold my hand when I'm slicing or dicing and whatever, mincing. But it was just that moment. It happened so fast. Within a blink of an eye, my thumb, literally, I was like, did I just cut off the tip of my thumb? Because that's how deep it went. Luckily, I didn't. But no, it's pretty gross. And I won't be able to follow in George's very short-lived footsteps where he was a hand model. My thumb now is going to have a pretty gross scar. And my retirement plans, after, my face goes and sags and wrinkles, I thought I could at least maybe be a hand model, get some Botox in my hands, but that's not going to happen now because of cutting that damn baguette. In other news, my mom is visiting, so that's always fun. She's cooking me some amazing Indian food, and I'm spoiled whenever she comes here. My tummy is very happy, and the kids are so happy too. We all are. We love having her here, and she's here for the long haul for a few weeks, and that's always fun. Mama Desai in the house. Okay, let's do it. Let's get into this episode. The synopsis for the finale is as follows. Jerry's NBC pilot is resurrected by the network's new president, who wants to produce 13 episodes. The four friends celebrate by taking NBC's corporate jet to Paris, but plane problems lead to a stopover in a small town where they witness a carjacking and fail to intervene. A new Good Samaritan law leads to their arrest for not helping the victim. Elaine is accused of bad phone etiquette. Kramer gets water in his ear during his beach trip. Jerry, Elaine, George, and Kramer, aka the New York Four, are put on trial for not helping an obese man when he is carjacked. A succession of people from the quartet's past are called as character witnesses who reveal the group's less than charitable past deeds. They are sentenced to 1 year behind bars. The show ends with Jerry performing a stand-up routine in the prison cafeteria. This episode was written by Larry David. All right, we start out in Monk's. George is just in a mood. He's not happy. He needs ketchup, but the waitress hasn't checked up on them. She came to the table once and she just abandoned them. It's like going out with someone and never hearing from them again. Yeah, same thing. Not really, but it's something, Jerry says. George then turns around and asks the woman in the booth behind them for ketchup. She consults with the dude in her booth with her and says, "What do you think? Should we give him the ketchup?" "It's up to you," he says. She decides, we may need it, so no. George turns around even more enraged. Jerry asks if he wants to go to the movies later. What for? To see a movie. George is sick of it. Go to the movies. You go, you watch, you eat popcorn. Jerry asks if he's showered. Yeah, because he's giving the not showering vibe, according to Jerry. And George kind of reveals what he's pissed about. He hasn't had his turn. Where are his 15 minutes? "Oh, stop complaining," Jerry says. "You have your health." He's sick of health. "It's not doing it for me." The woman behind then hands him the ketchup. "Okay, we're done with this." "Oh, very gracious," George says sarcastically. George tries to pour the ketchup onto his burger, but it's not coming out. She used it all. Even more rage. The actress in this scene is McNally Segal. She plays a woman who withholds the ketchup from George. She's best known for her roles in Sons of Anarchy, The Jersey, and The X-Files. And she's also the sister-in-law of actress Katie Segal, Peg Bundy herself. I find her very irritating in this scene, which means she plays the character perfectly. Next, we're on the street. Jerry and George are walking, and a man walks by pleasantly and says, "Nice day." What was that? That, of course, annoys both of them. Kramer drives up, and he slams on his brakes next to them, launching Elaine forward in the passenger seat. She thanks him for the ride and gets out. Unlike George, Kramer is totally giddy. He wants to go to the beach. He asks them if they want to join. What are you, crazy? Kramer feels like there's something in the air today. Can you feel it? There's something in the air. Then he drives off. Elaine's now standing on the street with them, and she remembers, "Oh, I forgot to call Jill." She pulls out her massive cell phone and calls Jill, asks how her father is doing. Is everything okay? But the reception is terrible, and she can't hear Jill at all. And the whole time she's on the phone, Jerry and George are giving each other these looks, just kind of rolling their eyes. Elaine says she'll have to call her back and hangs up. She immediately gets reprimanded by Jerry and George, saying, "You can't make a health inquiry call from a cell phone. No good. It's a faux pas." And George reiterates it's a big, hefty, stinking faux pas. Why? Elaine wants to know. Jerry explains it's like, "Oh, I don't want to take up any of my important time at home. I'll get it out of the way on the street. And the street phone call is the lowest. Total disregard. It's selfish. It's dismissive. It's pompous." George leans in. "Why don't you think before you do something?" Elaine just glares at George. "Here's a thought. Bye-bye." And she exits. Jerry and George reflect. Too much? My take, either Elaine doesn't wear a seatbelt, or, I think the more likely scenario is that Kramer doesn't have seatbelts in this car. I mean, after all, he did lose a steering wheel once. At any rate, the physicality of Elaine just balled up after he abruptly stops the car is very funny. So right off the bat, we get some great physical comedy from JLD. The Larry David flavor, it just continues into this scene. It was in the last scene. I don't comment on the scenes that Elaine's not in, so I didn't put my commentary in there, but we're getting that Larry David flavor. The whole conversation about phone etiquette has that classic Seinfeldian feel, which I totally love. These inane conversations about the excruciating minutia of everyday life. This is why we love Seinfeld. The level of outrage by both George and Jerry is what makes this work. And of course, it's George's last comment about thinking before she does something. That's what pushes Elaine over the edge. I love that change in expression and just leaning into him and saying, "Bye-bye." Now, I can't let this go without commenting on how this is so indicative of the times, right? Cell phones were just getting more popular in 1998. Now, of course, they'd been around for a few years, I think since the 80s. But in 1998, it's still pretty early in the whole having your own personal cell phone. It was definitely around. I remember my brother got a cell phone a couple years into college, which would have been like 96 or 97. So, it's not totally unusual to have one, but they weren't at all reliable, for sure. I mean, Elaine having a lot of static on the cell phone call is very believable. I didn't get my first cell phone until the year 2001. Yeah, I guess I'm going on almost 24 years having a cell phone. And who in the hell is Jill? In the notes about nothing, they mention that this is a friend she must have made after the episode where she declares how she has no female friends left. Who is Jill? All right, so in the spirit of what I did a few episodes ago, I'm going to make up a backstory. Okay, I'm going to say she met Jill at the health club in the sauna. She was telling her the story about how she felt a woman's boobs by accident. She fell into them and they just bonded over that. Jill had a lot of opinions and now they're super tight. And poor Jill's dad's in the hospital and Elaine wants to really check on her. It's her only female friend. All right, next we're in Jerry's apartment. Jerry and George enter, George still expressing how he's pretty disappointed in Elaine with the whole cell phone thing. He tries to pee in Jerry's bathroom with the door open, but Jerry puts a stop to that immediately. It's not a pee party. Jerry checks his messages, one from NBC. He calls back all nervous. And after a short conversation, Jerry tells George it was the president of NBC calling and that they want to have a meeting about Jerry. Our show? When? Right now. They start freaking out. George thinks he needs a sports jacket. He won't feel like a writer. You're not a writer. Right. And they exit. Next, we're in the NBC offices. Jerry and George are in the waiting area, and George is just so nervous, beside himself. He needs water. He starts yelling, "Water here!" Jerry starts lecturing George. Now, listen. He doesn't want a repeat of last time. Don't blow this. George is on board. Now, don't lean too much into the whole show about nothing because maybe they want something. George is fine with that. Anything, everything, something, nothing. Who the hell cares? Put me down. I'm down. They get called in by the assistant and they walk in and everyone greets each other. George spells James Kimbrough's last name and Mr. Kimbrough's very impressed. I love the little part where Jerry's like, don't spell. But George is just revved up. He's coming in a bit too hot, talking about the crispy, crisp weather. Finally, under his breath, Jerry says, "Shut up, George." So James Kimbrough just gets to the point. He tells them how everything in development that he was looking at just wasn't exciting and that he wants a water cooler show. And that has to be explained to George because he doesn't think it's really accurate. People don't use water coolers. They use bottles. Jerry cuts him off saying, "Well, I think Mr. Kimbrough makes a good point." So Kimbrough lays it out. He says after freaking out from seeing the pilot, he wants a 13-episode commitment and that he wants to give the show time to grow. Then he starts saying what specifically he likes about the show, especially loves that Kramer, and then maybe Elaine and Jerry could get together. Now, Jerry's very agreeable, but George doesn't really want to do relationship humor. Then Kimbrough comes in saying, well, we could not do the show altogether. How about that? Or we can get them together, George agrees. We cut to George and Jerry walking out of the office silently, celebrating. They almost hug, but they decide not to. The actress in this scene, Diane Travis, she plays a receptionist. Now, there's not much to her role in this episode. Pretty standard receptionist acting, which she does very well. But I loved reading her IMDb bio. And here's a little snippet that I thought was delightful. Diane shared a well-known scene in the original MASH opposite Donald Sutherland. Having a broad career in film, appearing in over 30 series on television, including the famous final episode of Seinfeld, Diane has shared her wry wit and tell-it-like-it-is personality with audiences for years. Diane resides in Southern California with a menagerie of animals and enjoys riding her beloved horse, Chisholm, every day. Aw. Good for Diane Travis. All right, next we're in Elaine's apartment. Elaine is calling Jill. She's sitting on her bed. She tells her, "Yes, I'm calling from my home, indoors. Yeah, I was just calling to see how's your father." Uh-oh, the call waiting beeps in. She tells Jill to hang on. It's Jerry. He's so excited to tell her the news. But she tells him, I'm on the other line. It's an emergency. Get off the phone. She clicks back over and tells Jill she's sorry, but she really needs to take the other call. She clicks back, all worried, asks Jerry, what's the emergency? He tells her all about the Jerry show and how he and George are moving to California. That's your emergency? She tells him she was on the other line with Jill. Yikes. Jerry tells her losing the phone face-off is worse than the cell phone walk and talk. My take, this is a funny scene. We get more of that vintage flavor with the Seinfeldisms, cell phone walk and talk, phone face off. I love that. I like that change in emotion JLD shows so well here. She couldn't care less about Jerry's stupid news, just that he messed up her call with Jill. After all, they're so tight from meeting in the sauna. We do see her actually worried about Jerry for a second. I like that little moment where she's like, what's the emergency? I mean, it's a tiny plot compared to everything else going on, but I like that they keep this whole thing with Jill going. Next, we're in Florida and Queens. At the Seinfeld's place in Florida, Helen and Morty are congratulating Jerry over the phone. Morty says how they were idiots not putting that show on 5 years ago, and he thinks that all TV is crap, except for Xena the Warrior Princess. And Jerry agrees, yeah, it's pretty good. We cut to the Costanza's place. Estelle and Frank are so excited for George, but Estelle just needs confirmation that the NBC guys actually said they liked it. When she finds out that George is going to be writing, she's surprised. I didn't know you knew how to write. She kind of doubts him and doesn't know how he's going to come up with all those shows and all those ideas. Frank snaps at her. Would you leave him alone? You'll shatter his confidence. George argues he doesn't need any ideas. It's a show about nothing. Oh, please. Estelle thinks the whole thing sounds pretty stupid. It changes her tune pretty quick. Next, we're in Jerry's apartment. We hear Jerry on the phone reacting to the news that NBC is letting them use their private jet to go anywhere. Kramer enters. He had fun at the beach. He tells Jerry he missed some major femininas. Kramer also has some water in his ear, so he's hopping on one leg, tilting his head, trying to get the water out. Jerry reveals the news to him about the show and how he and George are moving to California. Kramer isn't so happy about this. Moving to LA, it's tricky. She'll never let you go. If the show's a hit, you'll never come back. But the news of using their private jet really cheers up Kramer. Jerry says the four of them will go on one last big fling before California. Next, we're in Monks. All four of them are at the booth. Elaine is so excited about this trip on a private jet. So where are we going? Well, Kramer wants to go to Japan because of geishas. They cater to your every whim. They can discuss anything, even baking, as he points to a confused Elaine. She's like, what the hell? Elaine suggests Russia. Well, they think that's a bleak choice. No, she says, it's springtime. You can't be bleak in spring. George tells her with disgust, if you bleak, you bleak. Fine. Elaine then suggests Switzerland. But George is like, it's a bit too hilly. Elaine is quick to poke fun about he's not going to be doing any walking. Well, what if I want to walk around? All right, well, then you walk down the hill and we'll pick you up. Well, what if I'm at the bottom? Elaine snaps. Just forget it. Jerry stops the fighting and says, why don't we just go to Paris? Ooh, everybody's on board with that idea. So it's settled. We're going to Paris. They all put their hands in the middle. Yeah! My take. This is the last Monks scene. Wow. All the times in Monks. So yeah, the last scene, all four of them in a booth. Such an iconic visual. And from the jump, the Benestanza tension is high. For whatever reason, Elaine and George are just waiting to attack each other, and I love it. When Kramer motions to Elaine saying, or baking, it's so small, but it's hilarious. I love the reaction from Elaine. Like, what? Why do you think I would want to talk about baking? Maybe the Easy Bake Oven. Duh, that's it. The Easy Bake Oven. Okay, Elaine, we figured it out. All right, so the subject of Russia right now is obviously fraught with, vicious tyranny and the infiltration of our own government and this dumbass president and whole administration being Putin's puppet. Anyway, but in terms of the relatively calmer times after the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, I still wouldn't be on board with Elaine's suggestion to go to Russia. Fuck no. Sorry, Elaine. Of all the places in the world, bad suggestion, in my opinion. And here we see George come at her with such venom. When you bleak, you bleak. And that look on her face, she's like, try me again, asshole. Like they are just, the tension is high. I love it. And well, he does try her again with the hilly conversation about Switzerland, which is so funny. She's so proud of her burns. She even looks to Jerry for validation, like, get a load of this guy. And then when she finally blows up, it was inevitable and so funny. I mean, he just keeps picking at her like a little brother. And I thought about maybe this is residual rage after he yells at her on the street about her phone etiquette. Maybe she's just still annoyed about that, and he's still annoyed at her about it. I love that callback moment of putting their hands together in the center, the yeah, same as they did in the masturbation contest. Very nice. All right, next we are in Jerry's apartment. Elaine enters and tells Jerry that the NBC limo is downstairs. Beep, beep, beep. She grabs the phone to call Jill one more time before they leave. And once again, Jerry knows this etiquette like the back of his hand. You cannot make a rushed call on your way out. Then she asks him if she can call from the plane. First, a cell phone walk and talk. Then she loses a call waiting face off. And now you're talking about a plane call? Fine, Elaine says. I'll just call her from Paris. And Elaine heads to the crapper. Newman knocks on the door one last time. He tries to weasel his way on the trip with a sob story, but Jerry says no. And then there's a final monologue by Newman about how one day Jerry's day of reckoning will come and Newman will be there watching when it all comes crumbling down, and he exits. My take, obviously a scene designed to let the great Wayne Knight do his thing, and it's done brilliantly. We get our last hello, Jerry, hello, Newman of the series. But we also get a little continuation of Elaine's plot with Jill and how she can't make a call like that when she's rushing out or on a plane. Come on. And I always love the beep, beep, beep. So fun. Okay, next we are on the NBC private jet. They're dropped off outside in the limo, and the pilots introduce themselves. The bags are taken care of. It just keeps getting better and better. Jerry and Elaine high five. Then they enter the plane. Jerry, Kramer, and Elaine are so impressed. Wow, there's only way to fly, huh? George is not on the same page. This is it? Later, mid-flight, George is leaned over his seat talking to Jerry and Elaine. He says he's really disappointed with the plane. Jerry can't believe he's complaining about a private jet. And George brings up Ted Danson. This is not the plane he gets. Ted Danson's not even on the network anymore. Elaine has had enough. She tells him to shut up. You are ruining the whole trip. George continues, this is a real piece of junk. I don't even feel safe on this thing. He says he might write a letter to Mr. Kimbrough. You're not writing any letters, Jerry yells. And Jerry's yelling wakes up Kramer in the background. Elaine tells George, would you turn around? He's annoying her sitting the way he is. It's effeminate. George is like, what? This is effeminate? How? I don't know. It just is. George turns around and sits, and Kramer gets up and starts jumping up and down due to the water still in his ear. They tell him to stop, and George says it's not safe to jump on an airplane. Kramer, of course, loses his balance and falls into the cockpit where they tell him to get out of here. The plane starts making weird noises, and then all of a sudden, they are nosediving straight down. Oh my God, we're going down. Elaine says we're going to die. George is cursing God for not letting him be successful, and Jerry says it can't end like this. Well, Kramer's ready. Glory, hallelujah. So on the way down, George decides to confess that he cheated in the contest. Why? Jerry asks. Because I'm a cheater. Great, I won, Jerry says. Elaine, in tears, starts to confess something to Jerry, and he tells her, no, I need to tell you something too. No, me first. Jerry, I've always... And then the plane starts leveling out, and they all start cheering. Then we cut to them on the ground. The pilot apologizes and tells them we're going to get everything checked out. Turns out they're in Latham, Massachusetts. The pilot suggests that they take a cab into town, and he'll page them once the plane is ready. My take. Okay, this is a big scene. We see the impetus for the major storyline in this finale, the almost plane crash. Oh my goodness, George is such a brat, but I love that this is his attitude. Totally unimpressed, still bitter for some reason about Ted Danson. Along with a lot of other examples in this episode, this is probably the most blatant clue that Larry David wrote this episode. George is back to being the Larry David parody, and I do feel like that got a little bit removed from the non-Larry David season. So I'm so glad it's back. I can completely see Larry David complaining about a luxury private jet that's taking him on a free trip to Paris. This is so Larry David. And of course, Jason Alexander, per usual, plays it brilliantly. We continue with the Benestanza bickering. I've always liked JLD's delivery of everything from "would you shut up" and telling him to turn around because I think it's a little effeminate. And then, of course, the "I don't know, it just is." Now, I did a little, with the emphasis on little, research about the dangers of jumping up and down on an airplane, and I found nothing. Most of the results just talked about the science and the physics of how you won't land in the same place if you did jump on an airplane due to the rate of speed or something, but nothing about it messing with the plane. Now, in this scenario, I think it's more that Kramer tumbled into the cockpit that caused the mishap of the plane plummeting down. But I was curious. I was like, is jumping dangerous on a plane like George says? But turns out it doesn't seem to be. Okay, so here we're teased with a tender Elaine and Jerry moment. And I remember liking it when it first aired. You know, all the speculation that happened for this finale was incredible. I mean, so much speculation about what the finale would entail. It was everywhere. I mean, if you didn't live through it, you can imagine it was such a cultural moment. And of course, one of the possibilities, and probably the most talked about possibility, was perhaps Elaine and Jerry would get back together. Perhaps they'd get even married. Now, if you've listened to this podcast for the last almost 4 years, you know I hate Jerry and Elaine as a couple. I really wanted to leave it in the past. So when I heard these predictions back in 1998, I was not in support of it. I'm like, no, that'll ruin the whole show. But I thought this moment was very clever because of the way it was structured. Now, it was necessary to have George confess to cheating on the contest first. We needed that moment, so it made sense that Elaine felt the need to confess something as well. They all think they're going to die, so it's these last ditch efforts to say what they want to say. And we also hear that Jerry wants to tell her something as well. Now, 27 years later, my heart all mushy from years of life, I suppose, this moment kind of tugs at my emotions. I can't lie. I still would never want a romance. I would never want them to get married in the finale. But I can believe if they were on this plane together, it's about to crash, that they would admit that they've always loved each other. I'm such a sap. Okay, next we're in Latham, Massachusetts on the street. The four of them get out of a cab and Kramer has his video camera out. Elaine asks, what are they going to do about Paris? You know, they don't feel comfortable getting back on that plane. Jerry thinks they should just take a regular flight, but George refuses. He's all psyched up to take a private jet. Elaine says, well, I'm sure they'd fly us first class. Nope. George demands, you call Kimbrough and tell him to get another plane here, the Ted Danson plane. A guy walks by saying, nice day, which of course they all hate. All of a sudden, a guy starts getting carjacked across the street. Kramer starts recording instead of carrying it all, and they all start mocking the guy because he's overweight. No surprise there. Jerry's quip is, oh, there goes the money for the lipo. Elaine says, it's great to rob a fat guy because it's an easy getaway. I mean, he can't really chase you. George adds that it's a favor for him, actually, less money to buy food. The man getting robbed sees them across the street and sort of pauses, clearly wondering why they're not helping him. But Jerry just says, that's a shame, and he starts calling NBC. The robber drives away, and the cop comes over pretty quickly. The man tells him how he was just robbed. When we cut back to the group, they can't get another plane. Kramer thinks the plane that they have is probably fine. They just have to check it out, but everyone agrees they're not getting back on that plane. Jerry suggests they find some food here in Sticksville. Then a cop comes up and tells them that they're all under arrest. Elaine says, no, we didn't do anything. Well, that's the point. He says that they broke the law that says they are to assist anyone in danger as long as it's reasonable to do so. It's called the Good Samaritan Law, and he tells them to come with him. Ba 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 ba, bom ba dum bom 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 bom. We have the last Gilmore Girls Seinfeld connection. This is a little bit of a caveat. It's not an actor who appeared on Gilmore Girls, but they filmed this street scene on the Gilmore Girls lot. I recognized it right away. The gazebo, the street. I saw in the different angles. There's the high school. There's a street Lorelai walks down all the time. I knew it. I did confirm it. It is the Warner Brothers backlot. And that's where they filmed a lot of things, many things. But for sure, this is where they film majority of the outside scenes for Gilmore Girls. And I just thought, what a great way to end the series. We get the Seinfeld cast on the Gilmore Girls lot. I love it. My take on this scene. Okay, so this is the scene that causes the trial and really the meat of the episode. And okay, so it's somewhat believable in the sense that as gross and as cringy as it is, they are jaded New Yorkers and this wouldn't faze them at all. Of course not. They've probably seen people mugged once a week. But not only that, but the fat shaming has been well established in this show and none of them are immune to it. So my commentary isn't going to be about the morality of this moment because it tracks. It's not surprising at all. It's Seinfeld. Of course, they're going to be such jerks. They're not going to be at all affected by some guy getting mugged. And bonus, he's fat, so we can make fun of him. My issue with this scene is how forced it is. They're literally in like an idyllic small town in broad daylight, and there's a carjacking and no one else, conveniently, no one else is walking around. And plus, that cop shows up real quickly, so he couldn't have been that far away. I think perhaps if they were in an alleyway or maybe if it was at night, which would make it more believable to have only the New York Four, as they're later called, around. Okay, I could maybe believe it a little bit more. And honestly, this watch for the podcast is the first time that that's occurred to me. I never thought about that before, but I think these little details contribute to why this finale wasn't so well received, but I have a whole lot of opinions about that. I'm saving that for later. But yeah, I just think it's a little bit forced to have this open in the street of an idyllic town. I mean, there's a gazebo, for God's sake. I mean, I know it's not Stars Hollow, but it's supposed to be like Stars Hollow, right? And in broad daylight, this guy gets mugged. A cop appears within 30 seconds of the guy, getting carjacked. So I don't know. And the fact that like no one else is around, it's not the best choice. Okay, next we're at the police station. All four of them are in a holding cell discussing how ridiculous this Good Samaritan law is. I mean, they think it's crazy. I mean, why would they want to ever help somebody? That's what nuns and Red Cross workers are for. Elaine asks the officer right outside the cell, "Could you tell me what kind of law this is?" Apparently, it's modeled after the French law enacted after Princess Diana died and all those reporters just stood around doing nothing. George asks what they need to do. Come on, let's just get out of here. We'll pay the fine, whatever. Oh, no, the cop says the maximum fine is $85,000 and at least 5 years in prison. The four of them are shocked. George says, no, we have to be in California by next week. Oh, gosh, the cop says, I don't think so. He's pretty sure they're going to be prosecuted. Better get yourself a good lawyer. My take on this scene. Now, I've always praised Larry David's writing for flowing so well and without a lot of exposition, but this scene is an exception. And this is another contributing factor to why this finale falls short. When you need to explain so much, it doesn't work, especially for a show like Seinfeld. Plus, we've been in this fast-paced episodes era for a long time now, where there are a lot of short scenes as opposed to the earlier seasons with longer and fewer scenes. So for the finale, it was sort of jarring to see these types of scenes where they're explaining so much, take up so much time, and, well, the biggest offense of all, not funny. There's no humor in this scene whatsoever. All right, next, we're in Jackie Child's office. Jackie is reprimanding his assistant or maybe delivery guy, I don't know, about the cheese on his sandwich. You people with the cheese, it never ends. He's alerted that Jerry Seinfeld's on the phone. Jackie answers, and after a few, he says, Good Samaritan law. He's never heard of it, and says, you don't have to help anybody. That's what this country's all about. That's deplorable, unfathomable, improbable. He puts him on hold and pages the infamous Susie. Susie's always paged when Jackie Childs is around. He says to cancel his appointment with Dr. Bison, another faceless person always named by Jackie Childs. And he tells her to pack a bag. I want to get to Latham, Massachusetts right away. All right, next we're in another lawyer's office. It's the opposing lawyer, and they see a headline in the paper saying that Jackie Childs will be defending the New York Four. So he tells his team that this means the whole place will be swarming with media. The whole country will be watching this case. So we have to do whatever it takes to win. And the big issue in this case will be character. And he says he wants to find out anything they can about these people, and I mean everything. The actress in this scene is Gay Thomas. She plays a female lawyer. She started out her career as a model, and she's also appeared in Law & Order, The Sopranos, and Nip Tuck. She's fine in this scene, not much to say about her performance. But this scene is another one that has no humor at all and only exists to explain what is going to happen with bringing all the past characters back as character witnesses. But good job, Gay Thomas. Next, we're at the police station. The four are eating what looks like to be some microwave meals. George is annoyed that the cop hasn't checked up on them. I know we're prisoners, but we're still entitled to catch up. Elaine is reflecting. She says, I guess we could have called for help. Yeah, but then we would have missed the whole thing, Jerry says. Kramer reminds them, well, I had it on tape. We could have watched it later. Oh, yes, the video. Forgot about the video. Jerry's beeper goes off and says, the plane's ready. My take, meh, filler scene, not much to say. Next, we go to Geraldo Rivera Live, and he's discussing the Good Samaritan trial. He throws it to the reporter in Latham, Massachusetts, Jane Wells. Says the mood in Latham is quiet despite the media circus, and in regards to the New York Four, she quotes one of the deputies saying, there's no love lost with that group. She also reports about some rumored friction between Mr. Seinfeld and Miss Bennis. They were rumored to have dated once, and possibly that ended badly. Geraldo says, well, who knows? Maybe the trial will bring them closer together. Maybe they'll even end up getting married. Another nod to all that speculation. All right, next we're in Florida and Queens. Helen is packing a bunch of cereal for Jerry, says that's what he misses the most. Meanwhile, at the Costanzas, Estelle is wondering if it was their fault that George is in this situation. Frank says it's not his fault, it was definitely her fault, saying Estelle smothered him. He couldn't get any air, he couldn't breathe. Well, she points out how he was always in Korea with his religious tchotchkes. I had to make a living. Then we see a quick scene of Newman leaving with a suitcase and laughing the whole time. And then there's a montage of various folks packing and leaving for the trial. We see Uncle Leo, Peterman, Putty in the 8-ball jacket, Mickey, Banya, the Rosses, the rabbi, Keith Hernandez, and Steinbrenner. Next, we're at the courthouse. The four of them are in a holding room, and Kramer and Jerry are eating cereal, while Elaine is looking pretty anxious. Kramer and Jerry talk about their struggles with the milk-to-cereal ratio since they've been in jail. It's a big adjustment. Jackie arrives. Elaine greets him with a big smile. Hello, Jackie. Oh, Jackie is not happy with George. Didn't I tell you to wear a cardigan? George thought it made him look older. Jackie lays into him. He's trying to give him a moral compass. You have no moral compass. He wants the jury to see Perry Como, and that no one convicts Perry Como. Perry Como helps out a fat tub who's getting robbed. Jerry laughs at this, and Jackie doesn't like that either. You better not carry on laughing in that courtroom, funny man. And he doesn't like his tie. He asks Susie to get one of his own ties for Jerry. Elaine asks Jackie, well, how do I look? Ooh, you're looking good. Elaine smiles all shyly. You're one fine-looking sexy lady. Thank you, Jackie. Kramer also asks for an assessment. Kramer, you're always looking good. You're genuine. The jury's going to pick up on that. Which is very true. I like that he says that to Kramer. Susie hands over a tie for Jerry. Oh, this one? Jerry clearly doesn't like it, and Elaine yells at him. Jackie says put it on, Jerry. My take. This is a really funny scene. And it's because of Jackie Childs. I mean, Phil Morris is such a genius. In many ways, he saves this episode because he is just top-notch all the time. We also, in this scene, get to see how everyone's feeling leading up to the trial. Elaine is clearly the one taking it very seriously. Jerry and Kramer are excited about cereal, and George is shirking the advice of his lawyer. There's a nice moment there between Jackie Childs and Elaine. I love how pleased she is that he compliments her. And I love her yelling at Jerry at the end. Like, will you fucking stop? Listen to Jackie. Next, we're in the courtroom. The bailiff announces the judge Arthur Vandelay as everyone rises. George can't believe it. It's his go-to alias. He tells Jerry he thinks that's a good sign. The prosecutor gives his opening statement, which includes how he's going to prove the four not only mocked the victim who was robbed, but that they have quite a record of mocking and maligning, a history of selfishness, self-absorption, immaturity, and greed, and that this time they're going to be held accountable. And then it's Jackie's turn. He says, "I am shocked and chagrined." He says that this is a waste of time, a travesty of justice, how it's unfair that these four are being persecuted while the real perpetrator is walking around lying and laughing and lying. He says how they are innocent bystanders. And think about that term, innocent bystander. And he says there's no such thing as a guilty bystander. He tells the jury only they can stop them from creating the guilty bystander. Elaine smiles at Jackie as he sits. You can see her mouth the words, "That was wonderful, thank you." My take, Elaine is in the scene, but not much to say. Once again, insanely funny performance by Phil Morris as Jackie Childs. Okay, next, I'm just going to kind of run through the parade of witnesses. We see Matt Vogel, the cop who arrested them, and they played the video that Kramer took, and we can hear how the four of them are mocking the victim. Elaine and Jerry are cringing, while George is pretty proud of his quip. Next, the victim takes a stand and testifies how they just stood there and did nothing. The NBC executives walk in and George notices them and he yells out, "Great plane! You almost got us killed!" And Judge Vandelay bangs on his gavel. Next witness is Mabel Choate, the woman who Jerry robbed for her marble rye. Jackie tries to object since she wasn't present at the incident, therefore her testimony is irrelevant. The prosecutor points out that they went to great lengths gathering numerous character witnesses to establish this is not just an isolated incident. So the objection is overruled. Next, Marla Penny, the virgin, testifies about the masturbation contest, and everyone is horrified. Donald Sanger, the bubble boy, George yells out in the courtroom, "It's Mopes! Moors!" And then the parade of witnesses continues. We have the wheelchair woman who Kramer gave the defective wheelchair to. The doctor who attended to Susan when she died talks about the restrained jubilation by George when he found out. The Rosses have an outburst screaming, "Murderer!" at George. Then Sidra Holland, their real and spectacular boobs. She tells the court how Elaine was sent into the sauna to touch her breasts to see if they were real. Also, Jackie's pretty impressed that Jerry dated her. "You dated her? She's fine." Joe Bookman, the library cop, makes an appearance. George's girlfriend with the kid tells everyone how George pushed everyone out of the way at her son's birthday party when the fire broke out. The security guard who caught Jerry and George peeing in the parking garage. The cop who arrested Kramer as a pimp when he was wearing the Technicolor Dreamcoat. The low talker takes a stand. She's scarred by Jerry's mocking of the puffy shirt that she designed. Of course, no one can hear her, and Jackie objects. "No one can hear what this woman is saying. Either get some other kind of microphone up there, or let's move on." I love that part. Then Steinbrenner takes a stand, saying George was a communist. Next, Marcelino. Cockfighting. The pharmacist telling everyone how Elaine was desperate for sponges, not the kind you clean your tub with. They're for sex. The religious boyfriend tells how Elaine exposed her nipple on the Christmas card. Mr. Pitt says Elaine tried to smother him with a pillow. Yev Kassem comes in, the soup Nazi. Elaine ruined his business by publishing his soup recipes. Elaine says, the soup wasn't that good anyway. "What did you say?" He stands up and yells. And then Babu Bhatt takes a stand. Jerry and Elaine didn't give him his immigration papers and he got deported. "But they do not care," he says. And then he waves a finger at them. "Very, very, very bad." And then next, we're back to Rivera Live. Geraldo says how closing arguments have been made and that the jury has been deliberating for about 4.5 hours. He throws it to Jane Wells again, and she says that the jury asked to see the incriminating video of them mocking the victim and how everyone involved is still reeling from the endless parade of character witnesses who testified against the New York Four. And so we wait. We're back in the court holding room. All four of them are waiting. Jerry says he hopes the uniforms in prison aren't that bright orange. Elaine agrees because she cannot wear orange. But Kramer is totally confident they're going to be acquitted because Jackie never loses. He asked the cop if a black man had ever been to his house. Did you see the look on his face? My take on this scene, meh, again. Next, we're in Judge Vandelay's office. Estelle knocks on the door, and Judge Vandelay asks how she got there. She pleads with him to be kind to George if he's found guilty. He's a good boy. Then she very suggestively says maybe she can do something for the judge. What do you mean? You know. Ugh, Estelle, no. Then we get a quick montage of all the folks in town, all the witnesses we saw on the stand waiting around. Some are in the courthouse, some are in the gazebo, in a bar playing pool. Newman's just in the back of a car eating. There's a funny shot of the soup Nazi serving bowls of soup somewhere. I'm like, where the hell is he serving soup? Everyone is loving it, except for Poppy. He signals he needs a little more salt. And then the soup Nazi grabs his bowl. No soup for you. And then there's a disturbing scene of Mr. Ross buying a gun with a very dark look on his face. We end the montage seeing Jackie in bed with Sidra. They're very into each other, and he tells her that they have plenty of time, that the jury could be deliberating for days. But then the phone rings. He answers it and says, "Damn, they're ready." Next, we're in the courtroom. Everyone's waiting on the judge. Jerry turns to Elaine and asks, "What were you going to say to me on the plane when it was going down?" "Oh," she looks at him and says, "I've always loved United Airlines." Okay. The jury enters. There's lots of tension and drama with everyone watching. Kramer leans over and thinks it's going to be okay. "That girl just smiled at me." Jerry points out maybe it's because she knows you're going to jail. The judge enters, asks for the verdict, and all four of them are found guilty, and there's a huge reaction from the courtroom. Estelle faints. Newman laughs so hard he coughs. The judge calls for order, and we see the four glaring at Jackie, so pissed, and Jackie sits down in shame. Judge Vandelay lectures them about their callous indifference and disregard for anything that's good and decent, and that they've rocked the foundation of society. And he sees nothing more fitting than the four of them to spend a year in jail in order to contemplate the manner in which they've conducted themselves. Judge Vandelay says, "I know I will," and he adjourns the court. George loses it on Kramer. "You had to hop on the plane!" Elaine turns and sees Putty. Very dramatically, she tells him, "Don't wait for me." All right. Frank is trying to rouse Estelle. "Gotta beat the traffic." Sidra comes up to grab Jackie, and Jerry's shocked. "You two?" Jackie says yes. And then he reiterates something that Jerry already knows, but never got to experience firsthand, so to speak. Tells Jerry they're real and they're spectacular. My take. The United Airlines line, meh again. I do like that Jerry brings it up. I mean, not sure I could come up with the funnier line or response, but it's a letdown. I didn't like this United Airlines moment. The funniest moment for Elaine in this episode is when she tells Putty not to wait for her. And the barely perceptible, all right, what an amazing moment. All right, next we're in a jail cell. All four of them are walking to the cell. Jerry points out it's only a year. That's not so bad. We'll be out in a year, and then we'll be back. Kramer thinks it could be fun. You know, we don't have to worry about meals or Saturday night plans. Plus, they put on shows. They could put on a show, Bye Bye Birdie or My Fair Lady. He tells Elaine, "You could play Eliza Doolittle." Elaine's response, "Why don't you just blow it out your..." And Kramer cuts her off with the "ee." The cop closes them into the cell. Elaine wonders, hey, if I called Jill from prison, would that make up for the other calls? Sure, they all agree. I mean, you only get one call. The prison call is like the king of calls. I think that'd be a very nice gesture, Jerry says. Kramer starts hopping and finally gets the water out of his ear. Whew, what a relief. Jerry looks at George, and he looks at his shirt, and he says, you know, that button is in the worst possible spot, and explains how the second button is the key button. It makes or breaks the shirt. George thinks, haven't we had this conversation before? We have? I think we have. Yeah, maybe we have. My take, I remember holding out some hope when I saw this scene for the first time. So when Jerry says, we'll be out in a year and then we'll be back, I thought, oh, okay, maybe that means Seinfeld will be back. That was totally a clue. Why would he say, we'll be back? I still think the wording is a little odd. Anyway, it was probably just me, but I was wishing so much that Seinfeld wouldn't be over that I thought this was a clue, like, okay, maybe they're just taking a year off and then they're going to come back stronger. Obviously, that did not happen. I'm glad we got a close to the Jill plot. We get some resolution. It's a nice touch and a fun moment for Elaine. You can tell she's so relieved to finally get the phone call with Jill right. This is one thing I do love about the episode. The satisfaction of a bookend, it always gets me. So ending the series with the same dialogue that started the series, I think that's very special and a huge positive for me in this finale. There is a tag to the episode. Jerry is doing prison stand-up. It's totally bombing, except for supportive Kramer, who's laughing so hard at everything. Jerry starts getting heckled and threatened. I'm going to cut you. The guard tells him he's got to go and tells the crowd, they've been great. I'll see you in the cafeteria. And they all boo him off the stage. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break and I will see you on the other side. Hello there. I bet you're a broad who enjoys a nice broad look, a wide span from shoulder to shoulder that makes everyone notice when you walk into a room. You're confident, you're sexy, you are chic. Unfortunately, we may have to live in a world of droopy shoulders. Due to the new tariff increase with Canada, chic shoulder pads will be shutting our doors. As the hockey capital of the world, Canada has been our premium source for elite shoulder pad technology. And if we cannot get you the best damn shoulder pads in the world, we choose to close our doors with our heads and shoulders held high. Our going out of business sale is happening right now. Prices have been slashed and inventory is going fast. So shake a leg and get over to Love's Discount Health and Beauty Aids and get all the chic shoulder pads you can. Now, if the shelves are empty, please ask an employee. They may have a case left in the back. It has been a pleasure to serve your shoulders for over 3.5 years. But now our founder and CEO, Blanche Varnson, can retire and enjoy the rest of her days in Del Boca Vista Phase 33. Please purchase what you can from our sale. Blanche would like the condo with the view of the man-made lake. Chic shoulder pads. Thank you from the bottom of our glenohumeral joints. And we're back. Okay, let's dive right into the final sack lunch from our most dedicated contributor, Greg. I just want to say to Greg real quick, thank you so much for being the constant support of this podcast. I so appreciate you taking out time from your life every week to send me your thoughts. It really does mean a lot. My original vision for this podcast was to have a group of people who would give me their thoughts every week. And it was in an effort to have different voices. You know, I was like, people are going to get sick of just hearing my thoughts about these episodes. But this is the way I designed the podcast. It was a little too difficult to figure out co-hosting situations. And that first effort just didn't work out very well with having a team of contributors because people are busy. People don't have time every week to watch an episode, put their thoughts together, send it to me. So, Greg, I am so incredibly flattered and so thankful that you chose to spend your time in this way every single week. So let's go ahead and hear Greg's final thoughts on the finale. Greg's overall thoughts. He says, well, we've reached the end. While this finale is not one of my favorite in TV history, I remember vividly skipping a math test in my freshman year of college to watch it live with the rest of the world. I know that this was Larry David's task to create, and I get what he was trying to do. And bringing back a ton of old guest stars was great, but I just didn't like the whole Good Samaritan law premise, and then what ultimately became a montage of old clips. Absolutely, Greg. I bring up the whole clip portion of this finale. I bring that up a little bit later in relation to how, well, there was a clip show right before the finale that aired. So there was an issue with that for sure. And I completely agree. It's not my favorite either, but I do see Larry David's vision. I think as I look back, I think the premise isn't the problem. The premise is great. I love this whole Good Samaritan law because, I mean, these four would definitely not live up to the Good Samaritan law. So I think the premise is definitely not the problem. It's the execution. All right, next in Greg's sack are his favorite scenes and Elaine moments. He says Elaine's best moments in this one are ripping on George. First at the diner when she says George won't be walking anywhere. And then later in the plane when she says how the way he's sitting is effeminate, which it sort of was, LOL. They played to the character strengths in the first half, Kramer doing physical comedy, George bitching about everything, and Elaine giving George shit. These are the best parts of the whole finale to me. I simply wanted more of them. Yes, that is absolutely right, Greg. I'll mention it later, but so much of this finale is sort of given to the non-principal characters. And I think that was also just such a grave mistake. Greg goes on to say, I do love the moment when Jackie Chiles is somewhat flirting with Elaine and she gets totally smitten kitten. Something about JLD's face when she plays smitten kitten is just absolutely adorable. And she can make that switch from being angry at George to being glossy-eyed joyous in a second. Her face acting cannot be topped. Completely. I love that too. And while I just wanted more comedy out of the main four, we do get those little moments, and I think it's so fitting. Of course, Jackie's going to think she's one fine-looking lady, and she's going to eat all of that up. And I don't blame you, Elaine. What a compliment, especially because Jackie Chiles has very strong opinions, so he is not going to sugarcoat anything. He says what he means, so if you get a compliment from Jackie Chiles, yeah, that's a feather in your cap. Next, Greg says, I also love the quick moment between Elaine and Putty where she says so sweetly, don't wait for me. And Putty just quickly says, all right, and walks off without a thought. Brilliantly executed. Agreed. I'm not going to say anything else. Just totally agree with that. Next in Greg's sack is his scene swap idea. He says, I'm not going to really do a scene swap here as much as I sort of wish they'd done something else altogether. We ultimately get so little of the main four once the trial begins, and maybe that was the point, to sort of give all these other actors who helped make the show a success one last chance to shine. And I have to respect that. Wow, I didn't see it that way. That's a really good point, Greg. Yeah, let's give these other actors, because if you listen to the commentary for so many of these episodes as I did, rewatching this podcast with the DVDs, they certainly marvel at the talent that they got to be on this show all throughout, 9 seasons. And they're not wrong. There have been such brilliant actors, but I'm not sure that was the motivation. But at the same time, I can see maybe that approach. I don't know. I guess I just don't know if that would be why Larry David wanted to execute it that way. But to your point, we just don't get enough of Jerry, George, Elaine, and Kramer. We needed more, and we needed just simply more comedy. Lastly, in Greg's sack are his other thoughts. He says, for my other thoughts, I would like to present the first and last and only Audible Sack Lunch.
Hi, this is Greg Hummel, who you've heard thoughts from through Shivani's voice week after week for years now, sometimes loving and sometimes not loving certain episodes or characters. Talking about you, Jay Peterman. But overall, laughing and enjoying every second of it. For a long time, when asked my favorite sitcom ever, I instinctively said Seinfeld. And in more recent years, I've loved both The Office and Parks and Rec as much or maybe even more because they were somewhat fresher in my memory. But this full series rewatch, episode by episode, and the recaps via this podcast have given me such an appreciation for my old fave. The writing, the characters, a perfect cast, yada, yada, yada. And especially our focus on Elaine, played by the heroine that is Julia Louis-Dreyfus, have brought this show back to the top of my rankings. I'd also like to thank you, Shivani, for this brilliant idea and execution, and the opportunity for me to participate. Though I could have done without all the deaths you've caused of many beloved actors from this series with your curse. Why did you do it? And for one last time from New York City, we will now close my sack lunch.
Thank you, Greg. For the last time, I did not kill anyone from Seinfeld. How dare you? How dare you bring this up in the last episode of Hot and Heavy? Thank you so much, Greg. And it was so fun to hear Greg's voice finally. And I have a few other voice memos from friends of the pod. Nancy Hayden, I interviewed her a few seasons ago, and she was so incredibly gracious to send along this message.
Hi, it's Nancy Hayden. I just wanted to send you a voice memo and tell you what I thought about the finale of Seinfeld. Oh my gosh. I read all the time that it's divisive and that people argued about it, and some people loved it and some people hated it. And I'm like, I loved it. I don't know how else it could have ended, I guess is what I'm trying to say. When I see that episode, I think to myself, I'll bet you from the minute they created this show that they were saying to themselves the entire time, Larry David and the whole cast, certainly Larry David and Jerry, were probably saying to themselves, these people have got to get theirs at some point, right? Like at some point, it has to come back on these people and they have to lose. And because there's just so many awkward situations that they're in, it's like the whole basis of the show is them doing things they shouldn't do. And so at some point, this has to come back and bite everybody in the butt. And these people have got to lose. And I'll bet you they knew that. If I know creating comedy, I'll bet you they knew that throughout the entire show. So that's why I say to myself, there's no other way it could have ended. I thought the callbacks were brilliant. I thought the parade of guest stars of people throughout the years in the trial was brilliant. I loved the whole thing, and I thought it was great. And I just want to say about Elaine, as a general note, I mean, are you kidding me? What would the show be without her? I think that she was the balance of those crazy boys, as a female character often is. And, Julia Louis-Dreyfus is brilliant. And I just saw that they voted her character in Veep as like the best comedic character so far of the 21st century. And I couldn't agree more because she deserves every accolade that she gets. Elaine was the heart of that show, which is funny because she was often so heartless, but I can't imagine the show without her in any way. So I think that she was brilliant. I think that you are brilliant for having done this incredible podcast celebrating this amazing woman and this amazing character and this amazing show. So huzzah and congratulations to you, Shivani. And I hope this wasn't an hour long because I talked a lot. All right. Good luck putting your finale together.
Oh, Nancy, I love you so much. Thank you for that. And thank you for such a positive review of the finale. Now, I've yet to give my final thoughts, but I have a lot of them. But to hear from you, a legend in comedy, a comedy writer, a person who has created so much comedy in her life, I respect everything you just said. And I agree with you. I think that the approach that Larry David took is one that I support. Honestly, I think the premise was strong. This Good Samaritan law, of course, these four horrible people would never follow a law like that. My opinion, the execution was just not there for me, but I so love that an expert in the field of comedy like yourself can really appreciate it for what it was. Thanks, Nancy. You have always been such a light in my life, from being my first improv teacher and just seeing all the wonderful things you're doing with the Detroit Creativity Project, a project that brings improv to students in the Detroit area and enriching their lives with an art form that is incredible for all life skills, for all people. And it's just been a thrill to know you. And thank you so much for sending that along. We've heard from Kenny before. Here's what Kenny wanted to say.
Happy New Year, Shivani. Just wanted to congratulate you on completing the pod. It's been great going back down memory lane, watching my favorite show, hearing your insights, and looking forward to your next podcast. All right, thanks.
Kenny, I believe you just Happy New Year'd me in that message, and it's March, okay? It's way too late for that. Thank you so much, Kenny, for all of your support this whole time. You always would send me things that were hilarious, Seinfeld related, of course, Elaine related, and you've just been such a bright light throughout this process. And also, guys, sometimes I would see Kenny out in the wild. We would be at the same dance class together. And such a sweetheart, Kenny would wear his Hot and Heavy t-shirt, and it just meant so much to me. So sweet. And if you would like some Hot and Heavy merch, I have t-shirts, I have stickers. Please email me at elainepodcast@gmail.com, and you could get your own Hot and Heavy merch. Another wonderful supporter, my friend Marianne, she and I met in the improv scene here in Denver, and oh my goodness, she posted about Hot and Heavy, promoted the podcast on her socials, just so sweet. She didn't have to do that, but I was so touched, and here is what Marianne had to say.
Hi, Shivani. I'm really sad to hear that we've reached the end for Seinfeld and for Elaine, but I've really enjoyed it. One thing that I noticed from the very beginning that I really loved was the way you made me aware of all the little things Elaine did behind, that were not behind the scenes necessarily, but sometimes in the background, like in the very first episode where she walks out with that plunger from Jerry's bathroom. That was just hilarious, the way you said, geez, did Elaine just take a big dump and clog his toilet? Things like that. That very first episode got me watching how Elaine conveyed, or JLD, I should say, conveyed so much with her body language, because the way she just walked nonchalantly between the bathroom and the wherever the plunger was stored was just so Elaine. And it got me paying attention to the little things that JLD did. She's such an amazing actor.
Thank you, Marianne. I so appreciate your support. So touched by all of those messages. Thanks again. Okay, let's move on to, well, what I'm calling a finale tally. So for those of you who've been listening, you know that I have been tracking a few things. The first one is Jacket Watch. So Jacket Watch was my tracking of every time a jacket, a coat was a significant part of a plot in the episode. So this happened because, and I've explained this before, but I'm going to explain it again if you don't know what Jacket Watch is. In an episode of Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, which was Jerry Seinfeld's show on Netflix. Well, it started out on Crackle. I watched it since Crackle, man, the shitty ass app. But anyway, he takes people out in a classic car. He takes them out for coffee, and it's predominantly comedians, but every now and then it would be just actors, writers, whatever. But anyway, he took out the comedian Neil Brennan on an episode, and Neil Brennan, a comedian, he was one of the creators of The Chappelle Show, incredibly funny person. I highly recommend watching his stand-up specials on Netflix. Anyway, he admitted to Jerry, I didn't really watch Seinfeld, kind of apologetically. And Jerry's like, I don't care. He's like, I've maybe seen like 5 episodes. And then Neil Brennan says, well, every time I watched Seinfeld, you guys were worried about a jacket. The sound clip of that made me laugh so hard. I just was like, that is brilliant. And just after hearing him say that, I was kind of in my head going, oh my God, there was this jacket and this jacket. He's not wrong. What is the obsession with jackets? And so that is where Jacket Watch came from. The final tally of Jacket Watch, 19 incidents. And that happened in 6 of the 9 seasons, with 15 episodes where the Jacket Watches happened. And the season with the most Jacket Watch incidents was season 3, with 5 episodes mentioning something about jackets. And 4 of them concerned the same jacket, Kramer's jacket, where he claims that this particular jacket attracts women. That jacket was mentioned in the parking garage, the cafe, the tape, and the nose job. And the fifth jacket watch that happened in season 3 was in The Stranded, where Elaine goes off on the woman wearing a fur. The next tally isn't something that I kept track of along the way, but in watching the DVDs for the episodes, they tallied the girlfriends and boyfriends of the main 4. So after 9 seasons, the main 4 have had many relationships, and this is where each of them stands at the finale. Kramer with 27 girlfriends, Elaine with 50 boyfriends, George 62 girlfriends, and Jerry 73 girlfriends. Damn. Those are a lot of relationships. And let's face it, you can't really call a lot of those relationships. They were just one episode, one-offs. Jerry, you break up with a girl every week. And then finally, my Gilmore Girls Seinfeld connections. This was my own personal tally because I'm a huge fan of Gilmore Girls, huge fan of Seinfeld. And just in the years of watching Seinfeld reruns after becoming a fan of Gilmore Girls, I just noticed a lot of crossover. So the final tally of Gilmore Girls Seinfeld connections, 34 total over 32 episodes. Most of the Gilmore Girls Seinfeld connections happened in season 8 with 9 connections. Okay, moving on to my favorite Elaine moments. For the finale, the Monk's Benestanza moment, I just love all of that bickering back and forth. I couldn't have asked for a better Benestanza vibe in the last episode. I don't love a lot of things about the finale, but the Benestanza back and forth, it's pretty good. And it's because Larry David is writing it. Love how she's like, you're not going to be doing any walking. Anyway, Benestanza, it's the best relationship in the series. And so that scene is my favorite moment for Elaine in the finale. A close second is her saying to Putty, don't wait for me. And then what makes it even better is Putty's reaction of, all right. And now in this finale episode of Hot and Heavy, I wanted to give you my top 10 favorite Elaine moments of the entire series. This was not easy to compile. I'm still kind of judging it a little bit, like maybe this isn't the right 10, but whatever. This is what I finalized. Okay, so my top 10 favorite Elaine moments of the series in no particular order. Number 1, Stella. Stella. High on muscle relaxers in Florida, yelling Stella. Amazing. Number 2, the reveal to Jerry that she faked all of her orgasms with him. You didn't know. And fake. So great. Number 3, dumb Elaine who's not having sex looking at the tires. Woo! Yay! Number 4, Toby impression. Oh, on that coffee table saying, put some coffee on me. And then the running down like she's on The Price is Right. Oh, love it. Number 5, of course, the little kicks, the Elaine dance that can't not be on this list. Number 6, when she declares in the movie theater with Peterman about the English patient, I hate it! Number 7, getting the case of sponges, desperate for sponges, and that entire interaction with the pharmacist. I just think it's brilliant, top to bottom. Number 8, you know what your name is in Indian? Jugdish. Drunk Elaine. Brilliant. Number 9, I can just say it with one word. Peach! And finally, number 10, germing up all of Peggy's office things, putting the keyboard on her ass, the stapler in the armpit. Love it. And those are my top 10 favorite Elaine moments of the series. Okay, moving on, I wanted to get into the finale reactions. So it's no secret, the Seinfeld finale was not the most well-received finale in TV history. In fact, it was pretty hated. So my source here, I mentioned this book a long time ago. It's called Seinfeldia by Jennifer Keeshan Armstrong. Highly recommend this book for any Seinfeld fan. So Seinfeldia is where I'm getting these quotes, and I just wanted to mention that book again. The finale attracted 76 million viewers, third most watched finale behind MASH and Cheers. The critic Ken Tucker, who wrote for Entertainment Weekly, wrote this about the Seinfeld finale. He said, "Talk about sour grapes. Returning co-creator David turns spiteful, unforgiving moralist, making Jerry, George, Elaine, and Kramer pay for all their years of selfishness, self-absorption, immaturity, and greed. Retribution prevailed. It's as if David forgot that in nearly every episode invoked, the gang was made to suffer for whatever wrongdoing they committed. It's not as if Jerry got off scot-free for mugging that old woman for her marble rye, as if George didn't pay for going cheap on those wedding invitations. This crew led miserable lives, and we relished their exceptional pettiness. That they should be punished for all the vicarious fun we had at their expense is David's way of saying we never should have made these cruel losers must-see worthy." Wow. I mean, Ken Tucker really hated this finale. And I think it's an unfair accusation to say that Larry David wrote this out of spite. I don't think it was a spite finale. Now, don't get me wrong. Larry David has many things to be spiteful for, many petty things to be spiteful for that he's illustrated in his Curb Your Enthusiasm series. But yeah, I thought this was very harsh. The New York Observer critic, Ron Rosenbaum, wasn't any nicer. He says, "The ludicrously humorless, pathetically strained, and witless final episode was confirmation beyond my wildest dreams of just how insanely overrated the show has always been. It was more than the most titanic flop in comedy history, although it certainly was that. It was the culmination of one of the greatest episodes of mass media-induced mass hysteria in recent American history. One that the sycophants, perpetrators, and promoters of the hype should all feel thoroughly ashamed of in the awful light of the morning after one of the worst hours of television since the cathode ray tube was invented." Woo! Ron Rosenbaum, spitting a lot of venom. Now, on the flip side, the New York Times' Karen James said, "The hilarious final episode was everything Seinfeld was at its best. Mordant, unsentimental, and written by Larry David. Wildly self-referential and slightly surreal, the final episode revels in petty details, turns cliches on their heads, and reveals why Seinfeld worked so well." Wow. Okay. So we got super venomous reviews and one that I think is a little too generous. So why don't I go ahead and give you my final thoughts? All right. My finale notes. My notes for the finale and the finale of this podcast. So when I watched this in 1998, I really, really, really wanted to love it. The almost immediate backlash, it was everywhere. The local news, entertainment news, all kinds of media. I mean, probably the internet as well, but I wasn't on the internet very much in 1998. Oh, what a nice time. Fast forward to today. I still say it's not the worst series finale I've ever seen. If any of you have seen the Dexter finale, we can talk about that. But through the lens of being a rewatch podcaster, I can dissect a little bit why this was a big swing and a miss by Larry David. Now, I already touched on this, but the tone of this finale is just too different. It's too different than what we were used to with Seinfeld. Now, I think it was different in some good ways, but mostly bad. There are so many unfunny scenes that were needed to move the story along and explain what was happening in the episode. And explanation isn't a great device, especially in a Seinfeld show, because again, exposition was always done so well, but here we have so much exposition and it's done in a very unfunny way. So that just doesn't work because for Seinfeld, we're used to every scene not only having that purpose to advance the story, but they were also funny scenes. So the funny was missing in a lot of the scenes in the finale. And as I said before, the ability for this show and Larry David in particular to get information out so organically, that was a huge reason why this show was so brilliant. But the real estate this finale gave to explaining the why and the what, it was very brutal. Another reason I think this finale just doesn't work is because once all of the character witnesses take the stand, we get a clip show in essence, right? Like every time a witness was coming up from the past and they mention what one of the four did to wrong them, we got a clip showing, okay, the actual incident. And let's not forget, right before the finale aired, we had a clip show. So we already had the clip show, and then this finale kind of provided a mini clip show once all of those characters took the stand. So it felt so repetitive and a bit dumbed down for the bonehead mass audience, if you will, especially for the fans of the show who, let's face it, we don't need a reminder of why George, Jerry, Elaine, and Kramer are terrible people. We don't need to re-see those scenes because chances are those 76 million viewers just watched that clip show. So that redundancy, that really did not help this finale. Now, some of you might be saying, well, some of the offenses were from characters from so long ago, so it was probably okay for them to show a clip. But again, for those of you who didn't watch live, NBC dedicated 2 straight hours to the series finale for Seinfeld. The first hour being the clip show that ended with that, oh my gosh, that beautiful montage to Green Day's Time of Your Life. So good. And then straight into the finale. So we saw a lot of the same clips because there were classic moments. So of course, they're going to bring those characters on that with those classic moments with the main 4. So again, I'm being redundant now, saying that this was redundant to show clips in the clip show and then in the finale. But I think the most egregious offense for this finale was that Jerry, George, Elaine, and Kramer barely got any comedy. It was all flashbacks. Then we had Jackie Childs, who I love, don't get me wrong. And then the parents got a lot of funny moments. I wish each of the main 4 got their moment of brilliance in this finale, but it just didn't happen. Like sort of how Newman did, right? Newman got this big monologue, but we didn't get that for Jerry, George, Elaine, and Kramer, and they deserved that. All of the attention and airtime went to this trial where the main 4 barely had any dialogue, let alone comedic moments. And they are the reason we watch Seinfeld. And yet, I think that was the biggest mistake. The 4 of them did not get their finale moments that they so deserved. With all that being said, I still think Larry David is one of the greatest comedy writers of all time. And watching Curb Your Enthusiasm will prove that if you aren't convinced of that. I can't recommend that show enough. In fact, you will see a lot of overlap. Part of me thinks sometimes Larry David would forget that you covered this exact thing in Seinfeld. But again, he can flesh it out more. It can be way more vulgar on HBO. It is so brilliant, so incredibly brilliant. And also back to the Seinfeld finale, the sheer pressure of this finale wouldn't have satisfied anyone. I mean, it would have gotten criticized to pieces no matter what. Impossible expectations were put on Larry David and this finale. I mean, it was incredible. It was all over the place. It was all people could talk about. So there's no way you could have lived up to all the expectations at that time in 1998. Now, if I were to be so bold and say what I would have liked, 27 years later, what I would have liked, and perhaps I'm being influenced by one of the best finales in history, Parks and Recreation, watch it, so fucking good. But maybe a jump into the future for all the characters and have it go super sideways, or even have the trial happen in an abbreviated fashion. Let the trial be done in the first half, and then in the second half of the finale, you fast forward a year and we see them all adjust to life on the outside again. And that nothing has changed. They're just as shallow and selfish as before. They learned no lessons going to jail. I don't know, just as an idea, this was what I thought could have saved that finale if we were going to go this route of a trial, the Good Samaritan stuff. But we needed it to feel like the Seinfeld we loved for 9 seasons. And unfortunately, this finale didn't have that Seinfeldian feel we were craving. Okay, so I want to move along to my final podcast comments. And of course, what would my final farewell thoughts be without talking about the brilliant Julie Louis-Dreyfus? When I started this podcast, it really was to prove to myself that I could do it. Also, dedicate my time and creativity to who I believe to be my greatest comedic influence and someone who I admire so much, not just as an actor and a comedian, but as a person as well, with all of her work in activism and environmental causes. JLD just fucking rules. So if she ever hears this, and I hope she does, when I started this podcast, I was hoping I would end it with some kind of acknowledgement from JLD, but I didn't make it onto her radar. And ultimately, of course, that was a hope, but it wasn't the goal. If she does ever hear this, JLD, thank you. Thank you for all of your brilliance, your talent, everything you bring into this world. And thank you for giving me a reason to create a project that proved something to myself that I so needed, that I am capable. I'm capable of doing something that I didn't think I could do. And to Elaine, thank you for holding these 3 dum-dums that you chose to spend your time with, holding them accountable, giving it back to them when they so deserved it. And also kudos to you for holding your own and letting not just them, but the entire city of New York know you can't fuck with Elaine Benes. And as stated in the description of this podcast, I hope you know, Elaine Marie Benes, that you are the sponge-worthiest of them all. The idea for this podcast came to me at a time when I was allowing fear to overtake my goals. And this is a common theme in my life. Fear of being judged, fear of failing, fear of disappointing myself yet again because I couldn't overcome the destructive voice of my inner saboteur. But then the pandemic hit. And like most of us, I was struggling emotionally with such a swift new reality that included a dried up well of acting opportunities. Ironically, a month before the world shut down, I had written a post on my blog, Impressionista, about feeling a bit stuck and how I needed a challenge. I needed to get out of my comfort zone. So then when COVID hit and we were all forced out of our comfort zone, I gave myself permission to start this podcast. And I just did it. There were moments of wavering, the self-doubt lingering over me like a dying housefly, but I pushed through. I was determined. I knew nothing about how to make a podcast, but I researched, I learned, and I created. So on April 21st, 2021, I was off and running. And it's been exhilarating, challenging, rewarding, and most of all, this podcast will always be my evidence that I can overcome all of the negative voices in my head. I can push away the urges to give up. And from now on, because of Hot and Heavy, the Elaine Benes podcast, I know I can fucking crush whatever I put my mind to. Now, what I'm about to say is cliche, but cliches exist for a reason. But if I can do it, so can you. If you out there have projects that you have been thinking about, but you're just talking yourself out of it, you think you can't do it. Because believe me, I am the GOAT when it comes to talking myself out of hard things because I just don't believe in myself. And just like I've talked about many times on this podcast, certain storylines can just get old and exhausting. And I had seen the episode where Shivani Desai gives up way too many times. I'm like, this trope is tired. Fucking stop. So if you can take anything away from Hot and Heavy, the Elaine Benes podcast, I mean, sure, take away some fun Elaine moments and some Julia Louis-Dreyfus praise. But along with all of that, please take away that your passion projects, whatever they may be, they are possible and you can make them happen. And I think that's all I can say about Elaine Benes. Thank you for listening.